Now, before we talk to Brian Doerksen, let's take a look at this.
Most churches around the world are small. And so when I thought about doing an event, I wanted something that was really accessible to everybody. And so that was my heart. Let's just do something simple and yet still totally about the heart and passionate. We decided to gather a small group so that it would be very intimate. We decided to take the musicians off the stage. We put the worshipers right beside us. And our hope and prayer is when this happens that everybody will feel that connection and participate in something that's universal, which is the desire for a connection with God and a need for the grace of God in their life. We're going to worship God and we're going to tell grace stories. Dal and Roger, we met recently, and your Indian background, you've come from this area. Of course, we live in an area where there's a lot of people from India, but you've got an incredible story, and I'm just so thrilled that you've agreed to share it because I just see God's grace all over you. Dal, why don't you tell us, like, what it was like for you growing up here, and what your life was like before you encountered the grace of God.
For me, I grew up in a family with all girls. We actually did go to the temple when I was younger, and we had a lot of women would come up and my mom, they would tell me to pray for a brother. Even the people at the temple, my mom would go to them for help because drinking is a big part of our culture. The men, it's accepted to drink, and the women sort of take care of the kids and manage the family. So the temple, they sort of rejected my mom and told her it was her fate. And it came to the point where she couldn't go there anymore. And she actually stopped taking us to the temple when I was 6. And we ended up moving to the other end of town where there was no Punjabi people.
And then you met this young man and headed towards marriage.
Yeah, and then he said he didn't believe in anything. I said I didn't believe in anything. We had a Sikh wedding ceremony, and at the ceremony, I accepted Jesus.
Okay, whoa. Hang on. I mean, hang on a second.
You're doing your own 100 Huntley Street show there. It's getting these great testimonials. Brian, welcome to the program. You really don't need any introduction to our viewers. This is quite the concept. How did it all begin?
Well, one of my most favorite things in the world to do is to go into my local prison and do concert worship times. And as I would consistently go in over the last few years, I started to become friends with these men, some of whom have committed terrific, horrible crimes. And yet they're being transformed from the inside out. And I started realizing that I could have this incredible fellowship because of the cross of Christ. And there's that passage in Isaiah 40. I'll read it here. Isaiah 40 verse 4 says, "Every valley shall be raised up." And you think valley, to me it's like the downtrodden, the people that have failed. And every mountain and hill made low, the stars in our world, the successful people. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed in all mankind, together, all mankind. So I was experiencing this fellowship with these men, and then I started thinking, these guys got to tell their story. What would happen to people from quote-unquote religious backgrounds if they're brought side by side with people with really rough backgrounds, and we start telling our stories with each other? And what if music would serve that storytelling, and then the storytelling would serve the music? And so that was the genesis of the idea.
And I understand that some of these prisoners were under guard, allowed to come to some of these gatherings to tell their story, right?
Yes, absolutely. We had a fellow named Bosco Poon, who came in under escort. His very first escorted, 4-hour pass out of the prison, and he was able to tell his story. And you have to understand that these men feel deep shame and guilt for what they've done, and then they have years where they're processing that and where they're getting, counseling and trying to prepare themselves to move on. Can you imagine how much, when they've experienced the transforming power of grace in a place that's all about law, can you imagine how much they want to tell their story?
Oh, yeah.
And so that was an incredible experience.
So the people sitting there listening to these stories must have been transfixed. I mean, you probably could hear a pin drop.
Yeah, one of my friends and brothers explains really the moment when he commits murder, and then what he does in response and how he cries out. And it was like, and I in that moment, and you can sort of see it on the DVD. People just kind of like, some of my friends who've never been in prisons, they're kind of like, and yet all of a sudden we start leaning in. If grace isn't true for that man, it's not true for any of us. If forgiveness isn't real for everybody, it's not real for us.
And I think it's a bit of a jolt too for the average person, whose stereotypical view of a murderer, for instance, is that which is gained from watching movies, where the person is cast as an outright villain who's just rancorous and evil and vile and has no conscience. I mean, I would think that almost 100% of those who commit murder are conflicted about what they've done.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I have limited experience because I've had conversations with these men in this one prison, but I think the ministry of chaplains across our nation in prisons is so incredibly important, and all the volunteers, whether it's Alpha programs or whatever, whoever reaches out in that consistent way to these people, just incredibly valuable, because they're on a journey, and the thing is, there I am, I'm face to face with one of the men. He's in his early 60s. He spent basically his whole life behind bars. And he looks at me with this twinkle in his eye, and he says, Brian, lately as I look in the mirror, I actually like what I see, because the love of God has transformed me from the inside out. And man, I tell you, when I drive away from that, back to my home, I'm just energized with hope.
Oh, absolutely. You call these grace stories. The average person out there, attending these special events, what's their concept of grace? Do they have a concept of grace?
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of us feel like we know the story of grace, but we really don't know the half of it. It's almost like one of those words that can get overused. It's a wonderful name that some girls are given, but it's, as Bono said, it's also a thought that can change the world. I'm so inspired by the classic story of Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. And isn't it interesting? Think about this. The priest, when Jean Valjean comes and he tries all those homes, and I don't want to get into the details of the story, and then somebody says, but you haven't tried, that bishop's home. And so he knocks, and in essence, Monseigneur Bienvenue, I'm sorry for my French, I'm not very good with French, but Bienvenue means welcome. Yeah. I mean, welcome to the place of level ground. His name means welcome, and the convict knocks, and in essence, he says to Jean Valjean, I don't need to know your name. You are my brother. Yeah. Like, okay, there's a man, a religious man, so to speak, who understands that everything in his life is based on grace, and that none of us keep the perfect law, that we're all in need of the grace of God. So stories, whether they're epic stories in novels or stories in people's lives, inspire us to believe that change is possible.
Yeah. So what is it you're about to do in June? Tell me about this.
Well, we're really excited for what we want to do is we're coming out to Ontario in June, and we want to go, June is Ontario, and then later on in the year and next year we're going to go to region by region. And we're doing 8 concerts, but they're concerts that are a mix of music themed on grace, and then local people in each of the cities are going to tell their story of grace. And so it's this partnership between us coming with the music and local people stepping up to say, I'm going to tell my story. And we've done it already in British Columbia, a couple of cities, and had an incredible, incredible time. Wherever possible, depending upon the venue, we're moving the musicians off the stage, out among the people. And so it's like the whole event is like a picture of level ground and grace.
And that personal narrative, there's no more powerful communication than a person's own story. I remember in the old days used to call it a testimony. You know, it's kind of a word that has gone by the boards, but to say this is where I was and this is where I am now, and it's all because of the grace of God. Now, how are you getting these stories? Are you asking local pastors to help you with that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I'm doing this week is I'm going to all of the 8 cities and meeting with pastors and networkers and saying, this is the vision, this is the heart. Do you know some people in your community that have been transformed that could tell their story in this way? And then we go from there.
Let's take a look at the dates, Brian. We'll put them on the screen here. St. Catherine, this is called Brian Doerksen Level Ground, the live experience. St. Catharines, Ontario, June the 10th. Belleville, Ontario, June 11th. Ottawa on June 12th. Pembroke on June 14th. North Bay, June 15th. Barrie, June 16th. Cambridge, June 18th. Toronto, June 19th. And you can log on there to uniteproductions.com to get more detail on this remarkable thing. Boy, you're going to be going for it there. It's going to be night after night after night.
Well, if my wife and children are going to send me out, they want me to be as fruitful as possible.
Well, hey, it's just awesome, Brian, and we pray the Lord's blessing on this great event and initiative of yours. I think it's terrific. How comprehensive of you. You are truly a multi-dimensional artist, and obviously richly anointed by the Spirit. Thank you for this.
You're welcome.